Okay, I'm back in the shop. I know it's been a while since the last video. Sorry about that. I've actually undergone a bunch of changes in the shop here and did some remodeling and tore out some old cabinets and put in some new stuff, as well as a piece or two of new equipment. So I'm going to try to be a little more consistent going forward, but you never know what's going to happen. This is episode 2 of the Watch Part Pen series. I wanted to devote this episode to the watch face. Very important part of the Watch Part Pen because it's kind of the centerpiece of the whole thing. Everything else is details around the face. Not only selection, but how we bend the face for the pen. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. I'm going to show you how I do it and a couple little details that might help you. And then, the fun part is picking out what you want to use for it. You can get an old one, a new one, a character one, or something that has sentimental value in your family. I get a lot of requests for that. People will send me an old watch that doesn't work that maybe was theirs as a child or their mother's or whatever. And it makes a really nice gift or something that they can keep just in the family. So some of the key tools that you're going to need to bend watch faces are a punch set. I use the Harbor Freight punch set. I've showed it before in other videos. It works really well because there's so many different sizes and you can pick the right size for what you need. I use a lot this Jeweler's Dapping Block. It works well. It's what I would actually prefer, and I'm looking for one right now, is something with deeper cavities. And the reason being is these wider cavities are so shallow that it actually doesn't give me enough curvature on some of the parts. So I have to either go to a smaller size or bend it by hand or something like that. Whereas a deeper cavity would work a little better. Before I had this block, however, I would actually just make my own out of wood, something fairly hard and common that I had laying around. I always have a lot of Cocobolo for some reason, so I've done a lot with the Cocobolo, and it's kind of the same as the metal dapping block, but it just gives you the option. You can basically cut one of these for any size you need as long as you have the drill bit and a saw to cut it down the lengthwise. So those are the tools mainly used. If you have access to an arbor press, it'll certainly make certain ones easier because you don't have to push and pull. You can just use the press. But those are what you need to start with. And I even started using this just an aluminum rod, and you can bend parts around that. So that even works well. So first I want to talk about the watch face. Now, depending on the size of the pen or what model pen you're making, you can pick from a lot of different faces. You can go with something this small on up to a pocket watch that could be as big as this. And obviously those are going to be handled a little differently. But the biggest factor in choosing the face is the material. A lot of the vintage faces have certain kinds of paints that can crack when you bend them, or even be made of porcelain. And I have this old porcelain pocket watch face here. It's the Raven, and I'm only doing this because it's already pretty much ruined and destroyed. But if you try to bend this, I'll show you what happens. It just cracks, and you can see it just flakes off of there. So obviously this isn't going to make a good face for a pen because you can't bend it and shape it. The porcelain just cracks. One way you can tell, a lot of the porcelain looks like this on the back. It has the green. I don't know if that's some kind of enamel or what, but I've noticed that's what the porcelains look like on the back. So I don't even try to bend them anymore if I see that. I use them for something else because they are really cool and I hate to destroy them. So aside from the paint, whether it be plastic, another type is a lot of pocket watches and old watches have a paper front. And what it is it's paper laid over the metal, and it's just essentially glued on. You can do it a couple of different ways. You can bend the metal and leave it intact, seal the paper up so it casts well, or you can actually use a razor blade and separate the paper from the metal. And really there's no advantage to doing one or the other that I've noticed. I actually have done both ways and they both work just fine. So it's kind of whatever your preference is. If it's already coming off, you might want to just separate it. If it's intact nicely, I would just bend it, seal it, and go from there. Now when you're looking at these faces, like I said before, it's all materials. Certain ones will be a real thin metal or a thin material, whatever it may be, and you could actually just take a punch or whatever you're bending around and perfectly shape them just with your thumb. You can see just real quickly, I get a perfect curve on that because it's so thin and light. Now, they're not all going to be that way, and I wish they were. Most of them will be more like this one. This is an old Mickey Mouse watch. And if I try to take this and bend it, it's actually so rigid I can hardly even bend it. But I certainly can't get a nice bend on it. So that's where the dapping block comes in handy for that. Now I'll go back to that in just a sec. But the other thing you're going to run into, especially with some of the older watches, is they have a lot of wrapped and bent metal on the edges. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but they have a lot of edges. Now you can do a couple of different things. You can either flatten that out, just hammer it out, tap it out, or you can actually take these scissors, back to the same scissors I use for trimming my carbon fiber, and you can actually just cut right along here. And again, it's the curved blade scissors, so it always cuts out, so I don't have to worry about cutting in and over cutting, but I can actually follow this line, and I know you won't be able to see this, so you'll have to take my word for it. But I can actually make a perfect cut with the direction of the face with these scissors. And the metal's thin enough, it hasn't seemed to hurt the scissors. I've done it hundreds of times and they're still sharp. So it seems to work really well, but that's a nice way to use an old face like this. And I'll go ahead and bend this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim all these edges off. And there again, it's perfect little cut. And the beauty, I guess, is if you don't make a perfect cut, it's a vintage part and it's very unique anyways. So now I've got a nice flat face. I might take this, and I would have a hammer normally, but tap out those edges. Just make sure I don't have any burrs or anything. Like that. And now you can see I can set this in the cavity and press it down, and that's how I get my bend. When I'm using this, I'm going to do a couple of different things. I'm going to first probably start, depending on which pen I'm making and what size I need, I'm going to start with this being a little bigger, and I'll put the punch or whatever I'm using, and I'm going to try to do this so you can see. Let's see here. Get there. I may even go a size too large to initially bend it, just so I get that first thing. And you can see that doesn't take much pressure, so this face is actually pretty soft. And with just that one press, I've got a pretty good curve going. If I realized it was that soft, I might actually just shape it with my fingers. And then I can always shape it to the tube specifically and give it that better bend. Now, if this wasn't enough of a curve because of the size of the punch or the size of the cavity, I can actually go to the next size smaller and place my already curved part in there and give that a little press. And that'll actually give it that little smaller curve, and you can progressively step down. I've found that if you do the whole curve at once on a very small size, you risk damaging the face, cracking the paint, or even scratching it. Now, if scratching is a problem, I have put paper and felt in here to prevent that from happening, but that'll just give you a little more protection. That is pretty much how I bend the faces. The other parts, such as the gears, would be done exactly the same way. Now, there are some tricks and tips for that I'll show you in the next video, and we will progress, and we're almost there. You can see that little guy is curved. So, a lot of options here, no one right way or wrong way to do it. You can use a lot of different tools and you just got to figure out what works for what you're making. Thanks for watching. Be sure and post any comments or questions below, and I will see you next time.